Happy Friday. So today's health video is going to be on the mental health. So I got a colonic last Friday, and the conversations that we had in there were pretty good in a sense of helping you understand how when you have toxicity in your body, you really don't realize how much it actually affects your mental health and your emotional health. So one of the things that we kept coming back to is, when you're constipated, how you're not thinking about anything besides, you can't take it down, but you may be constipated, not for the physical part of the traditional, usually what I would ask somebody is like, oh, how much water have you drunk, or like how much fiber have you had, or whatever. But how is your mental health? Like, are you stressed the hell out? Having that stress in your life, it does affect your nervous system, because your colon constantly contracts to get the food down, and it can get sluggish, or it can be fast. And so people don't really put that together that, if I'm stressed out, my peristalsis is what it's called, but my peristalsis will somehow, goodness gracious, affect my digestion. So take a moment and think about that, when that correlation to like when you're stressed out, when you're feeling depressed and all that kind of stuff, and ask yourself, how have I been eating? How is my elimination? As a nurse, that's the one thing that you ask the clients, outside of other stuff, you take your vitals, but one of the major questions is, when's the last time you took a bowel movement? And it's important so we know who we dealing with, in a sense. As one of the examples I remember clearly is how one of our teachers was saying that a patient was just cussing folks out and irritable and just agitated, and they couldn't figure out what's going on. And then somebody was like, oh shoot, when's the last time you take your butt down bowel movement? And she said like a week. Well, once they went ahead and did a viewing, I'll put it that way, she was so compacted that they had to do a digit, kind of like when you do babies, right? And as soon as she finished pooping, she felt great. She was in a good mood. She was not cranky or irritable. Another example of how not being regular can affect you is your high blood pressure. That was another example that they used in school. A kid, young, he shouldn't be having high blood pressure at this age, but he was, and all the other, tests came back fine, but somebody, I think the teacher was telling me, she was a student at the time, and she remembered that, no, she was actually an employee, but she remembered back to school when her teacher said that how, being constipated can affect your blood pressure. And so out of all the people that was there that day or whatever, no one, didn't think of that. So she asked the young man, and yeah, he hadn't taken a dump in a long time. So they gave him a laxative or whatever, Pralicolates or whatever. And after he pooped, blood pressure went down. And it was alarming because the blood pressure was really, really, really high, like really high. And something that simple, taking a dump, getting that feces out of your colon, out of your system, made his blood pressure go down. So a lot of stuff that we're taught to just blow off, I'm seeing that as I'm talking to more, as I'm even, working on my own personal stuff, mental, emotional. You can feel every time you have a release, energetically, emotionally, or whatever, processing things. And I'm not saying holding stuff, I'm saying working on the stuff that that you've been holding on to, whether it's grief, anger, resentment, any of those things, all negative. Those are energies that stay in your body, and you're not realizing that it's affecting you mentally, physically. You know what I mean? So take the time to evaluate yourself. We don't do enough self-examination. One of the things I appreciated in my personal development class some couple years back was that and they were right. We invest our time and energy in getting a good job, educating ourselves, just doing all this other stuff, getting educated about. But we rarely invest in ourselves, in our mental and our emotional. Physical, everybody goes to the doctor. Go to the doctor, go to the doctor, go to the doctor. But you're not really learning nothing. They just giving you some pills and masks, whatever you're dealing with. There are some that have some understanding, and they got the physical part down. They eat well, yada 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 yada. But they do not take the time to work on the stuff that's down deep and seated. If you study the brain, you would see why it's important to actually take the time to process. And not even, I use the word process, but I'm gonna change that based on one of my people that I use as healers. It's not just processing it. You want to let it go. That's the difference. And just let it go freely. A lot of times when things are starting to let go, you let either fear or the unknown, uneasiness kick in, and then you hold on to it a little bit longer because you ain't ready for the change. But as soon as you let go, you're free, and that can translate in other areas, So it's funny when you start really, really, really looking at the parallels of things, how you may be stunted or feel like there's a block mentally. Even for myself, I feel like I should be further along in certain successes, but as I'm let me use a process again. It is a process, but as I'm going forward and facing some of the down deep seated stuff, you realize how that affected physical movement and action. Yeah. And so as I'm doing this physically, and as I'm doing it mentally, as I'm doing it emotionally, I'm feeling freer. I'm feeling lighter. One thing I will say before I get off here is when I was about to leave my session, I mentioned, I was like, man, it's crazy, and most of us women, we understand this completely. But you lose weight and then you gain it back so quick, and I was expressing that to her. I was like, it's so crazy, because I'm like, I would say I'm pretty much 70-80%, health conscious eating and stuff. But what I didn't put together, and they kind of teach us that in massage school, is because I'm touching on people all the time, because I'm more of a healer, a lot of the weight that comes back on me is not my own weight. It's other people's weight. Because, excuse me? Thought that was a B. It's other people's weight. It's almost like seeing your body, and then there's like this much, of good example of other people's crap, right? That is transferred to you, that you haven't released, and it's just holding on. is a buffer. It's similar to like when you eat a bunch of crap and your body holds water to dilute all that crap in your system, because if it's concentrated, it might kill you. Um, it's like water weight, right? So if you could take on the other stuff that's going on around you that you're letting absorb into your system, um, and let that go, you know, the weight probably wouldn't come back so fast. And what's the right word? I don't want to say chastised me, but it resonated with me, because in school they teach you to protect your energy. They call them energy vampires. You know, when people come in, they seem very cranky, and then when they leave, they're very happy. And then when you see them, you're happy, but then when they leave, you're feeling cranky. That was a transference of energy. They sucked your energy because you didn't protect yours. And I can see now parallel how that can work on many different avenues. So the next time someone is short with you, or attitudey, or especially when you know it's not warranted, like you know you didn't do nothing. You know, a person walking down the street and they're just looking at you ugly or whatever. You know, you may just want to make light of it and be like, "When's the last time you took a dump? Or when's the last time you took a shit?" Because that was coming out of you. It ain't got nothing to do with me. So, till next time, see you next Friday.